Hi everyone, I am Adrienne and I am going to share with you some learning style information. So, a few weeks ago, I posted some videos. I did one on color personality, so I'll link that somewhere in this video. I'll also put it in the description or the comments. And I also did one on Enneagrams, which is something that I am still learning, but I find fascinating. So I thought this next video, I would just share some learning styles. And this is broken down into like 4 major categories. Not saying that your child is going to fit specifically in one, but you may notice that they have a stronger area, and that will just help you any way that we can understand our kids and ourselves better. It just helps us to prepare. As a teacher of a classroom of a ton of students, I always tried to incorporate as many different things as I could into my lessons so that I was reaching all different types of learners. So I'm just going to go through and talk about each of them and maybe give you some tips along the way with what you could use to hook them in and give them the best learning experience. Because as a homeschool mom, I know that I give myself so much grief, that I've put myself through so much trying to make things perfect, which is never going to be, right? And I have 2 small ones, so they're very distracting to my oldest. So I know that I have to give myself grace, and it's a journey, and it's something that I'm still working on 4 years later. But learn anything that we can learn, I think, about our kids will just help us prepare and just help us give them even more chance for success. So the first one I'm going to talk about is actually mine, and it took me probably until I was in like high school to figure out that this was my learning style. And once I did, it was so nice to know how I could learn the best, and that certain things would appeal to me and certain things just didn't stick with me, and I could never figure it out. And then it was like, oh my goodness, it's because this is my learning style. So it's called visual learners. If you have a child who can easily visualize something in their head, they like to look at charts and diagrams, that just helps they bring things to light for them. They really struggle with remembering things that are said. So if you're reading to them and you're asking reading comprehension questions and they can't look back in the text, that may be a signal that they respond better to visual cues, and they can't just rely on what they hear. They're going to need to see it also. They can also be easily distracted by movement. So if you are able to, I know as a homeschool mom, especially if you have a ton of kids, this is very challenging, but anytime I can send my oldest into her room to give her some time to concentrate when she's working on her independent work, I do that just so she has that clear time that she's not distracted, because I believe she is also a visual learner as I am. In your homeschooling, in addition to giving them time away from distractions, if you believe you have a visual learner, you want to incorporate anything visual that you can. Try and use charts and diagrams. Use color in your lesson, like highlighting certain information or having them circle things in different colors of crayons. Like we were doing a lesson this morning on verbs and adverbs. So you could circle the verb in blue and underline the adverb in yellow. I don't know. So then it just helps that color make associations and connections in their brain, which is anything that can benefit their memory and their brain work, and the wires, the connections and things in their brains, I think is a win-win. You also want to try and use something called a mind map, or some people, forget what they call it, but you take out a sheet of paper and you write down things and how they relate to each other. So you might start with some concept that you're working on. Maybe you're studying the history of the colonies, so you would write 13 colonies, and then you would write things off of that, and it's kind of like a web that helps you to organize all of your thoughts, but it just helps to put it down on paper. It's called a brain dump. Some people call it a brain dump. I like the organization of the web, where you start in the middle with your central idea or topic and then you branch off from there. I also like to color code, so each layer would be its own color. It's a little bit of my OCD coming through, I suppose. But Anytime you can use color and you can visually represent something, it's going to click with your visual learners. So if you're doing a lesson and they can draw something to go along with it, or they can color code it, that's going to be beneficial for them, just the way that their brains are wired to receive and store information. The next one I mentioned, auditory learners. Those are people who can easily follow directions that they hear. So they love reading out loud. They love, my battery is going to die. They love reading out loud. They love being read to. If you do like a read aloud, they love having discussions, just the banter, the back and forth. That really clicks with them. They love music over art because they like to hear the different pitches and the different instruments and the different variations and harmonies. So they would choose music over art, which is fine. Music is a type of art, so just keep that in mind as you're planning your curriculum and your lessons. If you have an auditory learner, maybe scale back on the art projects and incorporate more music. Maybe get them some piano lessons so they can start learning, or figure out what instrument they want to learn, and that would be another way of expressing themselves using a specific kind of art. They might even use self-talk to kind of coach themselves through something. Totally fine to talk to yourself if that helps you learn. They can be distracted by loud noises, and then music can distract them or it can help them focus. So you have to kind of figure out what works for your situation. Again, how many kids you have and what different learning styles they have is also going to come into play here. They can't have lots of loud noises around them because it's going to distract them from the sounds and the noises that they're trying to pick up on as they learn. These types of learners really thrive in study groups. They like to record things that they can listen to later to review it. So if you are a homeschool mom and you have auditory learners, you can record certain things or maybe find videos online that they're able to listen to over and over. So that just helps to store that information because they're hearing it on repetition without you yourself repeating it 13 times. You could either record yourself or find a video that does that. Make sure you're doing read alouds. I think all learners can benefit from read alouds, but auditory learners especially. And then you can let your child narrate while you record responses. So sometimes in homeschooling, you'll want to work on writing. I think writing is a really important skill, and I feel like it's not always taught very well, especially in public school, just because of time and all their restraints, but we won't get into that in this video. So sometimes it can be overwhelming for your child, especially if they're an auditory learner, to know that they have to fill this whole page with a paragraph or whatever. So if they can say it to you and you just transcribe it for them or you write it down for them, sometimes that's really helpful. And then once they see, wow, I was able to produce all of that and my mom just recorded it for me, that's something that you can use to build their confidence so that eventually they can write their own. But you can always do recording it for them. That's called transcribing, and that is something that could benefit them if they are auditory. The next kind of learning style are reading and writing learners, and these learners are great with taking notes. They're all about like digging into the textbook and writing down what's important, what stands out to them. They're going to be all over text features in the book. They easily learn from textbooks and reading texts like dictionaries and manuals. That just completely sticks with them and absorbs into their brain. That it's just a different way that they're processing information. They're really good with reading, so textbooks. So when you think about the traditional school with textbooks and reading, that's really focusing on this one specific learning style, and the others not so much. They love to write, so if you have a writer, you might want to consider looking at some other things you can do to encourage that. They love words, they love language. When you're homeschooling, make sure you're using books whenever possible. I feel like that applies to all learning styles, but especially reading and writing learners. You want to make sure that you are using books as much as you can, and that you're reading rich texts. So even young kids can be read to at levels higher than they themselves can read. So you want to be doing read alouds that are above their level, not so far above their level that they can't comprehend all the crazy words. You're not going to whip out like a college textbook for a kindergartner, but it is good to read older pieces of literature that might use different language than we use today. You still understand it, but they're getting exposed to some of those different words. Think about like the King James Version of the Bible and how just the different uses of the same words, you get the gist, you get the meaning, but the word usage is much different than what you're used to. Historical fiction, biographies, those reading and writing learners are going to soak that up. They're going to love that. You also want to make sure as a homeschooling mom that you're giving them opportunities to express themselves in writing. So whether that's having a journal or a diary entry or writing reports like book reports, they're going to be all over that because of their love for literature and writing, right? It goes hand in hand. So giving them that opportunity. As they get older, things may change. They might prefer one over the other. I had read where a mom had like a journal or a diary that she used with her daughter, and they would write like entries back to each other. So sometimes there may be things and topics that come up that your child might be uncomfortable talking to you about, but it will be easier for them to write it down. It's just another way to communicate with your kids. So I thought that was neat. Once my daughter gets a little bit older, I plan to use that. She does like to write as well, and then that just builds your relationship and your connection. And that's one of the main reasons we homeschool, right? To make sure that we have that connection with our kids and that we're in tune with their needs and that we can guide them along in their spiritual walk. So having a journal and a thing that you can write back and forth sounds like such a fun idea. The last learning type is called a kinesthetic learner, and they're people who learn by doing. They want movement and they're hands-on. So this would be your child who is not going to college. They're going to a trade school. They're going to be a mechanic. They're going to do something with their hands, a carpenter. They're building. They're creating something. They're not on the computer. They're not reading a stack of books. They want to be doing. And there's nothing wrong with going to college, and there's nothing wrong with going to trade school. We need all kinds of people to make our society. I think I read that we have a shortage of people with different trades, like electricians and plumbers and all of that. So no shame in going to trade school, and it's actually a lot more economical when you break down how much you pay for trade school and then what you make when you get a job. Anyway, another video, I digress. So they want to learn by doing things. They usually really love art because they're creating, and sports because they are moving. Almost every sport involves tons of movement, right? So they're getting their fill of movement. Sometimes these are the kids who need like a little fidget or something in their hands while they're listening so that they are able to focus. They have tons of different fidget spinners and fidget objects. So if that's what you think will help your student or your child, then grab some of those and try them out. Just even squeezing like those little stress balls or fidgeting with a pencil or something might help them to focus. And as long as it's not distracting your other children or causing an issue or causing harm, then there's no problem in it. It's just helping them to focus better. It seems kind of crazy that movement helps them listen, but some people just need to be moving. They're kind of fidgety. They like to be moving. So when they are moving and listening, they're able to do both things at the same time just to help them. You could also let them doodle. Some people like to doodle while they're listening. When I'm in church, I like to take notes because it forces me to listen, and I know I can't zone out and think about like my grocery list or what I'm going to do the next day that my brain tends to do. So when I'm taking notes, I'm super focused and I'm getting the important pieces and I'm writing them down, and then I have that I can go back to later and revisit. So make sure that you have some kind of way for them to get that movement out, whether that's doodling or a fidget toy or even like building with Play-Doh, especially when they're young. If you're working on like memorization skills, they're not going to want to just sit there and recite. They're going to want to do something. So playing with Play-Doh or any kind of little toy that's quiet is going to help them move their body, but also listen to what's happening. They love experiments. They love demonstrations because it's that hands-on, it's happening right there, like bringing it to life for them is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for every learning style, but especially kinesthetic. You also want to remember that they're going to remember what they do. You need to remember that they're going to remember what they do, not so much what they read. So yes, it's great to read. I love that my kids love to read. It's awesome to want to read, but not everyone retains the same information as they're reading. Some kids need to do things to remember them, and maybe that's standing on their foot and hopping around the living room while they recite their multiplication facts. I don't know what it is, but that movement helps their brain store it differently, and they're able to recall it. They're able to memorize it easier when they incorporate some kind of movement. And it can be silly, like hopping on your foot or doing yoga poses or whatever works for your family. So remember to get them up and moving whenever you can. We love to stop and do yoga poses quick because it's fun and it's silly and it moves our body. Sometimes I will have them use silly voices. Sometimes they move like an animal, like hop like a frog or jump like a kangaroo. I guess those are both hopping motions. What else do we do? Crawl like a bear, growl like a bear. There's lots of different things that you can get them up and moving and active that will keep them somewhat entertained and engaged while they're still able to produce the results that you're looking for, whatever it is that you are looking on. These kids also love field trips. I mean, what kid doesn't love a field trip? But kinesthetic learners really love it because they're seeing what it is that you're learning about, whether that's going to the zoo or going to like a printing factory where they can see books being printed, or different museums where they can actually see and sometimes even touch the artifacts that you may have talked about or read about. You also want to make sure that you're taking breaks. When I was teaching in school, we called these brain breaks, and there's tons of resources online. If you go, if you type brain breaks, or if you just make up your own, you can write ideas like down on a little index card. I'm sure Pinterest is flooded with ideas for brain breaks. There's different websites you can do that have like 3 or 4 minute silly things that they can do. There's different yoga channels that will do things for kids where it's just a real quick. You don't want it to be so long that it takes a long time to redirect them back into what you're doing, but sometimes you just need a break and then you go back into what you're doing and you can focus so much better. And adults are the same way, right? Sometimes you just need to get up and walk around. Maybe you're working in an office and you're just stuck and you can't figure out what you're doing. You get up and you take a lap around the office, or you go outside for some fresh air and come back in, and all of a sudden it's like you're seeing it with new eyes. It is the same way with our kids. So sometimes if things are not going well and you just feel like you're in a funk, they're not really into it, just stop. Take a little wiggle break. Maybe you want to have them do 10 jumping jacks. It doesn't have to be elaborate, just something to kind of break the monotony of what's happening and kind of redirect them, and then they're looking at it with fresh eyes once they return after a few minutes. You also want to give them opportunities for play. They are going to need more than the other learners. They're going to need time to play. That's why I was so sad when I was teaching in school and saw what the expectations were for kindergartners. They were 5 years old and they were expecting them to write like sentences, and I know writing is important and I know sentences are important, but kindergarten, I think that they have removed a lot of play from school, and there's not enough time for that. When they're younger, they learn through play. They can learn so much quicker when they're playing, especially at a young age, and especially if they're a kinesthetic learner. You have to have opportunities for that throughout your day. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and go build a tower with our Magnetiles, or go make something with the Legos. Oh, we're learning about mountains. Go build a Lego mountain, and we're going to talk about, maybe you can incorporate some science into it. We're going to talk about the ecosystems and the animals that live around here, and there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate movement and still bring some school into it. That's the beauty of homeschooling. So make sure you give them opportunities for that, and opportunities for art projects. They're going to want to create things. Maybe it's just getting out some stickers, and maybe you want to be brave and get out the paint, or there's a channel on YouTube that we love. It's called Kids Art Hub, where an actual illustrator shows you how to draw these cute little cartoony images, and sometimes we'll do that for art just to learn from from other people who are talented and trained in a specific skill. And then you have this beautiful masterpiece. So lots of ideas. I hope it wasn't overwhelming. I just wanted to give you some ideas based on specific learning styles. I like to incorporate little bits of this in everything, even though I think I know where my kids are. It doesn't hurt to expose them to other areas where different learners excel. And when they grow up and they're in the real world, not everything is going to be visual and not everything is going to be movement oriented. So they need to be able to adapt and learn in different environments. But when they're younger, it's great to really focus on their strengths and build their confidence. And then as they get older, then you can start really kind of evening out the playing field, so to speak, so that it's not all reading or writing or movement and there's a smattering of it. So I hope that gave you some value. I did not realize this video was going to be so long, so I really hope that that was valuable to you, and I just love sharing. If you have any questions or recommendations of videos you want to see, send me a message, add a comment, and I will do my best to deliver.